you.
Okay, just to make sure, because I have this my teaching impulse to want to do everything at once. All right, great. So I couldn't be more thrilled to have Jamal Bahmad and Will Higbee here with us today to discuss their book that they co-authored with Florence Martin, Moroccan Cinema Uncut. So this is an absolute must read for people interested in Moroccan cinema, but also for all of us interested in where to go with academic writing about film right now, because it is full of details about production, distribution, as well as really intense film analyses. So I highly recommend it, and they'll be discussing it in just a minute. I'd like to introduce first Jamal Bahmad that I had the pleasure of meeting this summer in Morocco. He is Associate Professor of Literature and Cultural Studies in the Department of English at Mohammed V University. He earned his PhD from the University of Stirling in 2014 with a dissertation on contemporary Moroccan urban cinema. And it also won the Best PhD Thesis Prize of the British Society for Middle Eastern Studies. He held a British Academy postdoc at Leeds, University of Leeds. He specializes and has published widely in the field of North African cultural studies with a focus on cinema, youth culture, cities, literature, and memory. He co-edited a special issue of French Cultural Studies on trash cultures in the Francophone world. And he also is co-editor of a special issue of Moroccan Cultural Studies Journal on Moroccan cinema, and the English language teaching in Moroccan higher education from 2020. In addition to working on his first monograph on Moroccan cinema and globalization, he co-authored Moroccan Cinema Uncut, Decentered Voices, Transnational Perspectives. And I'll also introduce Will Higbee, who received his PhD from the University of Exeter and was appointed lecturer there in 2002. His research focuses primarily on French and Francophone cinema, with a particular emphasis on immigrant and post-colonial cinema in France and the cinemas of the Maghreb. His research is also concerned with broader issues of national, transnational, and diasporic cinema. From 2006 to 2014, he was editor of the international peer-reviewed journal, Studies in French Cinema, and now he sits on the advisory board for the journal. He is the author of Post-Burst Cinema, 2013, and co-editor of De-Westernizing Film Studies, 2012. And between 2015 and 2018, he was the PI for an international research project on transnational Moroccan cinema funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. So that was the seed of this book that Florence Martin and Jamal Bahmad also were a part of. This led to, so in addition to this book, this led to the digitization and restoration of Door to the Sky, which he discussed a little bit, a key film in the history of Moroccan cinema by pioneering feminist director Farida Ben Nazid. As a result of this project, the film is being discovered by new international audiences through film festivals and online screenings. So it is such a pleasure. We have posted chapter 4 of the book, and I believe Jamal, would you like to begin?
Well, I was thinking that, since Will was the one who started, the project that this book came out of, he could just maybe talk about the project first and then tell us more, perhaps introduce the book. Because I think I could later on talk about Amazigh cinema and just try to illustrate some of the ideas that really animated, the book and the whole project. How does that sound, Nicole and Will?
That sounds great.
Let me reach for the unmute, Jamal, and yeah, that's fine. Well, it was a collaborative project from the start. I think that's really important to say. What was crucial for us, that this was something that was, being conceived, delivered, debated between the UK, Europe, Morocco, the US, but very much the kind of involvement of academics from Morocco, Jamal obviously being the sort of like the kind of key contact point there, but also filmmakers and film students and people within the SEM. We felt it was really crucial that this was something that was a collaborative project. It was, the book came out of a research grant that came from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and it had a number of parts in terms of we wanted to have link, explore the question of what the transnational meant, particularly in the context of an African cinema, and one that emerged, really from a very sort of quite limited position in terms of its production, through to becoming, depending on which figures you consulted, either third or fourth largest producer of feature films on the African continent, but one whose films were gaining a certain amount of traction, but not necessarily circulating and gaining a visibility, beyond, even within Morocco itself. So there was a kind of question about not where were these films being seen, and who and how were they circulating, and so that was that question of sort of distribution, exhibition was one that was key within the film. Something else that, sorry, within the film, within the book, one of the other things that we wanted to look at was precisely, I suppose, complicating this idea of what the transnational means in relation to a post-colonial cinema, whereby so much of the attention has often been focused in a transnational context on the sort of post-colonial axis between the Maghreb or Morocco and France. And so what we wanted to do was sort of not deny the continuing importance of that relationship or its kind of impact and ramifications on Moroccan cinema, but also to be thinking about the ways in which Flo's concept of how Moroccan cinema was deorbiting from the kind of that sort of from French cinema in that respect, and also thinking about the ways in which there were different centers and different hubs through which Moroccan cinema was circulating and was connecting, so between between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, or thinking about the different connections that there were within Europe, the importance of that diasporic connection in filmmaking, looking at the international politics of co-production. So we were also thinking about the issues around funding and production, and the way in which that was also dependent on the international festival circuit. So we did quite a lot of work as well, looking at how the film circulated, which festivals they were seen at, and that was quite illuminating in terms of sort of understanding that the kind of a limited number of films had quite an extended life, and found almost an alternative distribution circuit within the festival circuit, but were sort of very much a minority of the Moroccan films that were being made. But again, going back to that idea of thinking around the transnational as always in dialogue with the national, so not sort of using the transnational as a means also of understanding what Moroccan national cinema is today. And I think that brings us also back to Jamal's really brilliant work on Amazigh cinema, and this idea of the connection between the global and the local within that, which we thought was really important to include all of these elements, not just to think about the kind of films that were recognized on the art house circuit, not just to focus solely on maybe the popular successes within Morocco, but also to think about different kind of networks. So we looked at activist cinema, we looked at the sort of like the Amazigh cinema and the kind of the reach that had. We were thinking about diasporic filmmakers and trying to make all of those connections, and thinking about the different flows, and I suppose the kind of the dynamics and the power relations between those different elements, all of which came into this sort of understanding of what transnational Moroccan cinema might be. So that was the sort of, I think those were the sort of like impulses behind the project, but it was also really we were really fortunate that, you know, the CCM, many Moroccan filmmakers, you know, researchers, film schools in Morocco were also very generous with the way in which they embraced the project. Something else that was very key was, you know, I remember Jamal's first trip to the archive at the CCM, and you know, we were having this conversation about how much material was there and what, you know, what we thought was there and what else we could find. And one of the things that he said to me very early on was, you know, we also need a living archive of the filmmakers. So we actually incorporated that into the project. It was very much about, you know, interviewing as many different filmmakers as we could, and sort of and adding those kind of perspectives into our understanding of what Moroccan cinema was, is, and could be. So those were the kind of I think ways in which we began to analyze, and a lot of that is contained within, you know, I think it emerges within the book itself, you know.
It's very ambitious, and you did a wonderful job, all three of you, because I mean, what you're describing is such a web of cinemas and cultures within. So
yeah. Okay, I'll just add that to the, I mean, to what Will, I mean, said, that, you know, it was really also very interesting experience for us, because, I mean, like for this book, we were 3 people, but in the project actually we were, I mean, we're 4 people who were officially working on the project, but we were constantly working with other people. Mm-hmm. Like we had, I mean, 2 film students from Morocco go to the London Film School, for example, as part of this project. We organized 2 major international conferences, the first one in Marrakesh, 2016, and then the second one in Edinburgh, 2018. And the way also the conferences were organized was a bit unconventional. So we had a lot of round tables with Moroccan film producers, Moroccan filmmakers, and at all times we tried really to, I mean, celebrate the diversity of voices within Moroccan cinema. And it was also very interesting, I mean, for me personally, to get involved in this project, because until that point, I was working on these questions of globalization in Moroccan cinema, but I always felt that, you know, there was something that really was missing in terms of conceptual, okay, the conceptualization of this, I mean, post-colonial cinema, because until then, really, it was seen as just a cinema that emerged after independence. And what the filmmakers were doing were trying to really to show post-colonial society that was in kind of transition, in development, and so on. But beginning in 1990s, Moroccan cinema really, I mean, kind of changed, you know, dramatically. So we started having a lot of filmmakers from all sorts, so not just of, you know, kinds of linguistic, but also just, you know, kind of class backgrounds in Morocco, but also from different countries. But also, you know, the production itself was diversifying. So, I mean, up until that point, up until the 1990s, the absolute majority of Moroccan films were made with Moroccan money, okay, with support of the government. You know that in Morocco, since 1980, the Moroccan Cinema Center, which is just an office of the Moroccan government, had been supporting, I mean, film production. But starting 1990s, now filmmakers were getting, you know, getting into all sorts of co-productions and so on. And that was having an impact, not just on their films, but just also on who, I mean, got to watch those movies, okay? So they were increasingly circulating like on the international kind of film circuit. And also Moroccan cinema became just more visible, with a lot of films winning prizes at film festivals in Morocco, in North Africa, in the Middle East, in Europe, and so on. So I think, you know, this, it was very good to have, I mean, Will on the project as principal investigator, because he had done a lot of work on just trying to conceptualize, I mean, all these like Francophone, Maghrebi, I mean, the films from a transnational perspective. And then Flo brought into that project this idea of the orbiting of Moroccan cinema from its classical like French and Francophone, I mean, production, distribution, either works. And I also tried to bring in more diversity, like from, I mean, Morocco, by just trying to include as many film, I mean, kind of traditions as we could just put in the book. And if you look just at table of contents, but if you take time to read through the book, as you say, it's like, yeah, it's very coherent, like in terms of what we were trying to do, but, you know, in terms of the voices and so on, it's like an encyclopedia read sometimes like encyclopedia of Moroccan cinema, which is very interesting. I don't know how we managed to do it, but just having all that richness, all that diversity, I mean, in one book was really and it's for me, I mean, something that I'm really proud of. And we agreed from the very beginning in first meetings and a lot of phone chats that I had with, I was at the time at the University of Leeds as a British Academy postdoc fellow. And we agreed that, only a transnational approach could really kind of make sense and take stock, I mean, of that diversity that I mentioned earlier. So I don't know I don't know how we are going to proceed from here. I just leave it to the book, I mean, to speak for itself. But I think, Nicole, we'll just give space back to Will if you want, if he wants to add something. If not, I'll talk about one such, kind of until I mean, like really the book was published, marginalized, I mean, voice in Moroccan cinema.
Yeah, I think I'm happy if you want to sort of carry on, Jamal, and then I'll maybe come in a bit later. But I think there was, nothing specific to add to what you just said. So if you want to carry on, because I know there was a particular focus, right, in terms of what you'd ask people to read in preparation for today, Nicole. That's right, yeah.
Yes. If you want to speak specifically about the chapter.
Yeah. So I'll speak about Amazigh cinema or Berber language cinema in Morocco, because again, for a very, very long time, this cinema was, I mean, marginalized, not only by different, governments in North Africa, but by the Moroccan government specifically, but also by film scholars. And the idea is that the problem was that, it was very difficult to make sense of this cinema if you come to Moroccan cinema with this national cinema, I mean, kind of perspective, but also within a regional perspective, as you find, for example, in the books, I mean, Roy Arms, okay, a great scholar, has done a lot of work, I mean, on North African and Maghrebi cinemas. But the idea is that, this was very difficult, I mean, as a cinema, Amazigh cinema, I mean, to place, I mean, conceptually, I mean, within a book on Moroccan cinema. So the idea is that, in this book, we thought that, again, this, transnational approach, really is able, to translate a lot of this polycentric and diverse kind of nature of Moroccan cinema over the last, 20, 30 years. So we just did, a lot of case studies in the book, sometimes on movies, sometimes on just, film movements and so on. And in chapter 4, when I shared this part on Amazigh cinema. Chapter 4 is about Amazigh cinema, but it's also about women's cinema and diasporic cinema. So I thought it would be too much to speak about three of them, at the same time. So I thought I would just speak about Amazigh cinema as such. If you want me to share my slides, I can do that. If not,
I'm happy to. I think you should be able to.
Okay. It's not able to do that yet.
Okay. Well, then it should be able to.
Okay, maybe it's changing now. Yeah, okay, I can do that. Okay, great.
Wonderful.
Okay, so, my screen is there. So I'm going to talk a little bit and very briefly for just around 5, to 8 minutes maximum about really this Amazigh cinema. And this is one of the films. It's my favorite, kind of Moroccan film, Adios Carmen. I'll talk about it, later in the presentation, but just very briefly, maybe people, really are hearing about Amazigh cinema for the first time. This is a really cinema that is, also very difficult really to define, because are we talking about just films in the Amazigh language, or are we talking about films that really have as their focus like the civilization, culture, and just contemporary kind of, life of the Amazigh people or the Berber people? So the Amazigh people, they live across North Africa. This is their homeland, and it has been for, thousands of years. So they live in Morocco, Algeria, Mauritania, and then Mali, Chad, Libya, and Egypt. And this is, roughly like in Morocco today, we are talking about, really a predominantly Amazigh society, if we are talking about this society in ethnic terms. Of course, linguistically, it's much more diverse. Okay, because we have other languages. So we have Tamazight, we have Arabic, we have even Hebrew, a bit of French, and Spanish as well. But, you know, like, I mean, North Africa is generally speaking a very homogeneous kind of ethnic, I mean, landscape. But these people, the Amazigh people, they have, right, North Africa has been invaded by so many, empires, including the Romans, but before that, Phoenicians arrived here. And also in the midst of that, you know, Jews arrived from the Middle East, and they have been part of the ethnic and cultural landscape up and until today. Then the major event also that occurred is the Arab invasion in the 7th century of North Africa. And this would lead to the gradual, Islamization of the Berber or Amazigh people, but not their Arabization. So the Islamization is different from Arabization, because even today, you know, the people who speak language, you know, are very significant component of these societies. In Morocco, although the official statistics don't exist, we're talking about anything between 40 to 60% of the population, despite the fact that since independence in 1956, language had not been in schools and in the media and so on. And even today, language is being taught in only about 6 to 8% of all Moroccan schools. During the colonial period, the Amazigh people, they defended their homeland, you know, in different countries of North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and so on. But in post-colonial period, that the things really, they achieved independence, political independence, that is. But the different governments and different regimes in North Africa, they adopted Arabic and Islam as just two main components or two pillars of national identity. Therefore, the Amazigh found their language, but also culture, but also their political systems, their laws, and so on, marginalized. But you know, they created an Amazigh kind of rights movement that was from very beginning, transnational in the sense of it having different, kind of centers in Morocco, Algeria, but also in diaspora. And academics, they played a major role in that, you know, in Paris in the 60s and 70s by creating famous Berber Academy and so on. Another academic actually was involved in 1980, so Mouled Mahmri, one of the first Algerian writers in French. He is the author of La Colline Oubliée, but he's also, father of the modern Amazigh movement. In April 20th, so Habiba is going to a next edition of Habiba's Festival in New York. It's taking place next year on 20th of April. And then this is a very significant event, you know, for the Amazigh or for the Berber people of North Africa, because this lecturer, Mouled Mahmri, who was based at the University of Algiers, was going to, to the Ouzo, that you see here in the map, which is in northeastern Algeria, to give a lecture on ancient Amazigh poetry. The lecture was banned, and that led to just, strikes by the students, but also just by civil society. And then the authorities repressed that, you know, in blood. Then, you know, this had been kind of the beginning of a very, an Amazigh revival, not just in universities, but also in the wider society. But, you know, it was also, a lot of people, got killed because, the authorities in Morocco and Algeria, they just refused to recognize the rights of the Amazigh people. One of such dramatic and black events is the Black Spring of, 2001. In Morocco, during what you call the years of lead, like during the reign of Hassan II from the early 60s up until 299. But even before that, like in the Rif and southeast of Morocco in late 50s, people were just, killed and so on because they were, Berbers. Then in early 2000s, different states of North Africa, Morocco and Algeria mainly, started recognizing the linguistic and cultural rights of the Amazigh, started teaching language in schools, but again, this is still very, very limited, even though the different constitutions that came into existence after 2011 made Amazigh to the Berber language an official language next to Arabic in these countries. So, and what is very important to bear in mind when we talk about the Amazigh movement is that, you know, it's not limited to one national space. So just like this cinema that we're talking about, it's very transnational at so many levels. Then, despite the fact that, you know, again, people, for example, Algeria and Morocco were not allowed to make films in the Amazigh language, but they started making them nevertheless in 1980s with little relative kind of political opening up of these countries. And it started as video cinema, then amateur films and so on. But professional films started to be made in both countries in 1990s. And these are just some titles from Algeria, like Once Upon a Time, 1995, and then Bayaz Mountain, 97, then 97 still Forgotten Hill. And this one was by Abdurrahman Bougarmouh. He wanted to make this film, which is based on a novel by Maulud Ma'amri, father of the Amazigh movement, back in the late 1960s. But the Algerian government, banned him from, or didn't allow him to make it with dialogue in the Amazigh language, more specifically in Kabyle, dialect of Algeria. So he made it just, with dialogue actually in Algerian Arabic, but he couldn't make it with dialogue in Tamazight, including the Amazigh language in the film up until the late 1990s. Other excellent films from Algeria in the Amazigh language are The Excellent House, and there are so many more. In Morocco, this also cinema began to develop around the same time, despite lack of official support, but also the constant fear of censorship and so on. And there were so many films, some of them are even classics now, although and people you can now watch them a lot, on the internet. But initially at that time, it was just, films that circulated through, unofficial networks. They were, on VHS, and then VCDs and then DVDs and so on. But now, they've gone almost completely digital. And this cinema in Morocco, even today, is hugely popular with its own star system and so on and so forth. Yeah, and then even more films, like when the Moroccan state decided to acknowledge the Amazigh, component of Moroccan national identity, they started supporting also cinema. Sometimes this support just meant, allowing Amazigh films to be shown, in cinemas, or to be included in the official competition or non-official competition sections of film festivals in the country. And the Amazigh filmmakers, they responded by making even more films. And, there are so many great films here on the list. So we include there maybe, Tinghir Jerusalem. It's a film about the Amazigh Jews, who left Morocco in the early 1960s and went to Israel and other places and so on. It's a very good documentary. I can also cite Adios Carmen, which tries to talk about the Amazigh community, not of the country, the Rif that is. And then a very good documentary by Tala Hadid, Moroccan, Amazigh, British, Iraqi filmmaker based between London and Marrakesh. So this is, she has made excellent films, and House in Fields or House in Fields, the Mini Grand, 2017 is just one of them. Okay, this is my last slide. So this is, Adios Carmen here. And it's a film that came out in 2013, and it won, the big prize at the Moroccan National Film Festival, the year following. And it's directed by a Belgian Moroccan Amazigh filmmaker called Mohammed Al-Amraoui. And if you look at, as Will was saying earlier, Moroccan cinema is very diverse in terms of its production networks and distribution networks and so on. The film is a co-production between 3 countries, Morocco, Belgium, and the United Arab Emirates. In terms of languages, again, it's very different. It's in most of dialogue is in Tamazight and Spanish, and a little bit of Darija or Moroccan Arabic here and there. So the film itself, just by being a performative act out there, is really the orbits from dominant Arabophone and Francophone cinema networks, film networks that had been dominant in this part of the world for so long, or this part of the world and and France, which used to be the main partner in terms of film productions and this film production and distribution here. Okay, then it's the film in terms of the story. It's really about different. The Spanish colonial legacy and post-colonial legacy also of Franco's dictatorship in Spain. And as a lot of Moroccans were living the Rif, going to Europe looking for economic, opportunities and so on. Also, a lot of Spanish people were coming to Morocco, in order to escape dictatorship of General Franco. And then these two kinds of migrations came to a head in 1975 with the Green March in Morocco, whereby Morocco reclaimed Southern Sahara as part of the country. And then, if General Franco dies and so on, and the Spanish people started going back to Spain and so on. So it's really very, very interesting story in itself, but also when you look at the movie, part of it is that just people going to the cinema. Okay, because Carmen there in the title, she works as an usher in a cinema, in Nadur. And then she just, the people are just watching and actually getting emotional of watching Indian movies and so on. So Bollywood movies in Morocco 1970s, in a Moroccan cinema run by a Spanish team, but film audience is mostly just Rifin people or Amazigh people from north of the country. So I think anything but a transnational approach would be able to really, just begin to illustrate and just explain the complex and shifting movements of films and human stories within, across, and beyond the national borders. So this is just one example from many that we really, use in the book. So I hope I didn't speak for way too long.
Thank you so much, Jamal. That was very informative. I guess we can move into asking some questions. I had one, maybe to get us started, just in thinking about the chapter and your talk. So we have that Tamazight is an official language in 2011, correct? And we also have the first film with Tamazight, extensive dialogue in 2004, correct? The Sleeping Child.
Yeah, that's.
So I'm wondering how film may have been persuasive and may have encouraged Tamazight's entry into official language.
That's a very difficult question, and I don't know. I haven't done any research on the impact of films on just decision of the Moroccan government in 2011 to just make and acknowledge Tamazight as an official language of the country. But certainly Amazigh films, they were part of a cultural movement that was just actually trying to force not just Moroccan government but also Moroccan parties to acknowledge that we are a multicultural country, we are a multilingual country, and that country also had lost so much in terms of economic and social development by just marginalizing this community, its history, and so on and so forth. And it's very important also to bear in mind that Moroccan regime acknowledged language and culture as part also of a larger project, whereby Morocco has been trying also to just undermine fundamentalist Islamist ideology in Morocco, which led to things like terrorist attacks of 2003. So by just making the country officially multicultural, the regime is now able to just talk about even like a different brand of Moroccan Islam, okay, what they call Moroccan Islam, which is based on Sufism, based on Berber Islam, which is a bit just more open-minded and more tolerant and so on. So it was part of a larger project also because around the same time, Morocco, like you talked about 2004, it was in 2004 that also, the monarchy just, introduced or pushed, for the introduction of a new family status, law that just, gave Moroccan women many rights that they didn't have before, like the right to file for divorce. Also around the same time, the Moroccan regime, actually created a kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate the violations of human rights between 60s and late 1990s. So, actually just cinema, but also cultural production in general was really a very important component of all the changes that led to that moment, like 2011, and what came afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just to add on to that before, and also everyone, you can put your question in the chat or raise your hand. Just to add on to that, also in the chapter, you talk about SNRT and the television, and also how it started incorporating Tamazight. Could you talk about a little bit about that and how that also changed the culture, or as you said, it's not completely the media changing the culture, it's the culture also interacting and saying this is what we want to the media, but I see that was also important, the television.
Yeah, okay, could you repeat the first part of the question, Nicole? I only heard the second part.
I apologize. I was just asking about SNRT and how that was also part of this movement.
Yeah, so CNRS, like Moroccan National TV Network, is that what you're referring to? Yes, so they created like a channel in the Amazigh language around 2008. And they started just, and actually it has become, and we refer to that in the book, it has become one of the main producers of Amazigh language cinema. So they, I mean, initially, like in the very beginning, it was like film producers who were independent, I mean, creating independent production, I mean, networks. And then to some extent, you know, CCM, the Moroccan Cinema Center, also started sponsoring some of these films. But now the main producer of Amazigh films is National, I mean, Film. I think if Habiba is still around here, she was doing some, I mean, field work on that, I mean, last year. But, you know, certainly Tamazigh, I mean, TV network is one of the main producers of Amazigh films, I mean, today. Yeah, but I think all that was just came in answer to, I mean, things that started earlier. So there was the, I mean, civil rights movement. Then, you know, a lot of like, I mean, cultural productions that were really very activist in tone. And they just pushed, you know, the government and political parties just acknowledge diversity of the country.
Thank you.
I think what if I could just come in there, one other thing to add is sort of something that Jamal is mentioning as well, in terms of is thinking about the ways in which you have these sort of formal and informal networks for distribution of these kind of films for a plurality of voices that's emerging within a kind of Moroccan cinema, and the way in which those often also the diasporic reach, particularly, you know, Jamal talked about this for Amazigh cinema, is important as well. You know, it's this pattern of finding different channels to reach the audience, and ones that actually don't register necessarily in the official records of how many films are being seen and what's being viewed, you know, within the kind of, say, theatrical exhibition system, which, as you know, we all know, was sort of like in free fall. So it's also, and one of the things we were interested in was thinking about how there was what you might call distribution from above and distribution from below, and, you know, moving beyond the example of Amazigh cinema, you might think of, you know, work by Nadir Boumhouch, for example, who's someone else we focused on in the book, who was he called himself an activist who made films, and then there was a point where we said to him, "You're a filmmaker, right? You know, you're a poet. Don't stop playing down the kind of the beauty of, say, something like Amusu, for example, that he made." But he started out making clandestine documentaries about, you know, the sort of like the sort of the protest movement post-Arab Spring in Morocco, posting those online and finding, you know, massive audiences with films that were, again, going back to, I think maybe comes back to Alan's question about language and the language of address and so forth, that, you know, he was making these films, subtitling them in English, and sort of, and sending them out across YouTube, and the numbers, tens of thousands, were far more than anything that was being seen by 99% of Moroccan films within, you know, the cinemas. So there's this interesting thing about, you know, how we understand and define what a national cinema is, in terms of maybe looking back at records of sort of like figures in cinema theaters, but there are official channels and unofficial channels. And Nadir's work is also an example of one where he had to work outside of the, you know, of the official system, because he wasn't going to get the kind of, you know, the permits and the authorization for his films, and he was also outside of that kind of officially accredited. He didn't have his you know, his carte professionnelle, you know, so the card that he would allow him to work within, you know, officially within the system and be recognized as a filmmaker. And I think also within this chapter, the work on in the section on transnational contestation, for example, is also thinking about the way in which diasporic voices, filmmakers who are simultaneously inside and outside, are also able to, you know, have this kind of connection to the culture and the language, and the, you know, be connected to the sort of, like, say, the socio-political events that they're trying to document in their films. But they're slightly distanced in a way which is actually beneficial to them in terms of being able to sort of critique from the outside. So I think there's something really interesting as well around, you know, Jamal's idea of these global flows of very local images and narratives, and the way in which they're not only produced but also distributed and consumed, which I think is really important in the work that he's done.
Thank you.
Nicole, we have some questions. First off, Alan O'Leary, who a few months back was a fabulous presenter for this group. Alan, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure thing. Thanks a lot, Will. And thanks a lot, Jamal and Will Higbee, Will H, for the chance to read your chapter. Will Higbee has already gestured towards this question, but I wanted to ask about the consequences or the implications of writing the book in English, which is kind of an obvious decision in many respects, but just to kind of think about that. And it's a genuine question. To what extent is the book as such accessible in Morocco itself? And to what extent then, you know, is Morocco, or who is the book's addressee? I'm interested in who you wrote it for, really.
Me.
I was going to say to you, there's a simple answer to why it was written in English, which was to do with the funding that we got from the Research Council, and in terms of the language that the book initially had to be published in. I think that it's a really legitimate question, and one that, as I say, within the project itself, we did, you know, we posed those questions about who are we doing this research for, who are we hoping to reach? And I think actually when we began the research, often that was a question that people would ask us: why are you interested in this? What's the angle? Why are you doing this? I think that Jamal will be able to tell you in terms of what the reach of the book itself. Obviously, written in English, it limits it considerably. I mean, all I can tell you in that respect is anecdotal, that we had a really fantastic seminar which was delivered in English actually after the book's launch, with a really animated group of probably about 50 plus master students from the University of Fez, which was a really sort of like invigorating discussion and debate around the book. I suppose there's something there as well, that the book was also intended for an international, transnational audience, because it wanted also to spark other questions, not just about Moroccan cinema, but around how we viewed and applied the transnational. But I think that the obvious response there is that we would look to the possibility of having it translated, but again, that would be a question of means and interest from the relevant publisher. But Jamal, maybe you want to say something, because you're
I've been based in Morocco for long enough now to just say that I think the book has had a good reception. So as soon as the book came out, actually, one of the first invitations that we got to talk about the book came from, Morocco, so from the University of Fez. But I've had a lot of people just talk to me about the book. Well, the one thing, a major problem that we had is that actually, like, the price of the book, like the hardback edition, which was the first one, that was released by Edinburgh, was, actually for a lot of people, like just paying £80, to buy a book, in Morocco, it's out of the question. But fortunately now there is a paperback edition. And also, so it's no longer, that is no longer a major problem. I don't know about book sales, and so on. But the idea is that, we also, in Morocco, there have been a lot of changes in terms of people who are interested in film, but also languages that they use. So I don't know, maybe will have noticed that during the years that we spent doing research in Morocco, actually, you would be surprised by the number of young Moroccans, and not so young, Moroccans who can speak English, or at least read and understand the language.
Yeah,
I
was going to say that was, again, it's anecdotal, but that was also striking when we worked a lot with the faculty in Tétouan University, where they have a really excellent documentary filmmaking program and a PhD film practice program. And that's run by Hamid Aidouni, and we worked with them. We participated in the festival there. They have an international film school festival which runs every year. It's a really fantastic event that brings together sort of 50 plus young filmmakers to show their films in this amazing Art Deco cinema in Tétouan, and has a series of events that are running. Those events have been run in a mix of in Arabic, in French, in English. What struck me when the first time I attended that festival was the number of students, as Jamal said, who wanted to converse in English rather than in French. And I think there is we're obviously talking about a very kind of select, a small group, and it's a question of how, you know, how the ideas within the book can kind of reach people and have an impact. But I think that it's interesting in that sense that the transnational focus of the book also seems to tap into something which was equally that many of the young Moroccan filmmakers that we spoke to and who participated were far more interested in what was going on beyond that kind of post-colonial axis between Morocco and France than they were, you know, in solely thinking about, you know, historically the highest number of co-productions are in France. That's the best chance I've got of, so if I want to sort of engage with a kind of international audience for my film. So there was some really interesting sort of perspectives that we were privileged to gain from sort of attending those kind of festivals and events and engaging with film schools and seeing how, you know, Moroccan filmmakers and educators were working with their, you know, with young people and the emerging sort of filmmakers of tomorrow, basically.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Nicole? That'd be all right. I mean, it's just to follow that up. You haven't said who the book was directed at, though. I mean, plainly, it's a very well-informed, you know, scrupulous academic book, so it has an academic audience that are interested in these issues, both of Maghrebi cinema and post-colonial cinema, perhaps, and beyond, and as well as Moroccan cinema, more specifically, and transnational questions. But I wonder to what extent, given what you've just been saying, you also had in mind a specifically, you know, to make an intervention into film production, I suppose, or film reception, you know, within kind of real world contexts.
I suppose the you know, we've just come through our latest cycle of the kind of research audit and research excellence framework. So I've got words like output and impact and all those things sort of like, you know, on the tip of my tongue. But I think you're right. What I would say for the book, I think the book was, you know, it's a more scholarly output that's probably going to be directed to students and researchers. And I think the book also is a sort of particular kind of output that was a culmination of a whole load of work that was going on across the project. You know, Jamal mentioned that we had academic conferences that were bringing academic scholars together, but we're also bringing filmmakers together and bringing film students together in Morocco. And that was, I think, one of the things I was proudest of in terms of what we were able to do with the project was to use the project as a way to sort of, I think, facilitate and engage discussion between, you know, we had a group of young emerging filmmakers and activists, established, you know, relatively commercial Moroccan filmmakers and filmmakers who, like someone like Lamia Higbee, who's sort of like focuses on art house but international co-productions. And as a result of one of our conferences, bringing them all together, they formed the group and they were going to get together and discuss. And they actually said, you know, we never would have met before. We never would have had that connection. So I think there were ways and we were also trying to bring the ideas in the book into those discussions, into those, you know, situations and in different ways to present that information and engage. And along the same lines, that probably in terms of reaching an audience, I think, you know, getting the, you know, attached to the project, allowing the film to Farida's film, A Door to the Sky, to be restored and to be discovered by new audiences and to be seen by kind of, you know, Moroccan audiences and who would not have thought of seeing that film was a really important part of the project as well. And that act of restoration and making that film available actually is reflected in the work in the book, the scholarly research, which is about the circulation of Moroccan films, the issues around how these films don't have visibility, problems around the kind of theatrical, the crisis in theatrical exhibition and the infrastructure in that sense. So I think the outputs in that respect were kind of connected. So the book, I think, has quite, in that, I would say, has a more limited audience, but the book is a sort of, within the book and the ideas in the book, we have tried to sort of engage in a variety of ways with different kind of audiences and you know, different stakeholders. And also the fact of bringing two young Moroccan filmmakers, two female filmmakers, to spend 3 months on a bursary, immersed, studying, making connections and making films at the London Film School was really important for us. I think it was really important that those opportunities were there. So it was, the project was ambitious in that sense, and the book is a kind of particular channel of that work. But I think hopefully, I mean, it's for others to say, not for me, but hopefully that's allowed kind of a range of ways into the project for people for whom the book would be inaccessible, either for, you know, for linguistic reasons or prohibitive cost, or, you know, whatever it might be.
I wanted to tag on to what you just said. I definitely felt, especially in the conclusion, that there was a call to film scholars to become curators. And looking at your description of Martin Scorsese finding chances and giving that an international audience, and your own work on Osfour's films and Door to the Sky. And I really want to accept this call, and I want to know any advice you could give us on how to go about helping films be restored, locating films that need to be restored, and how to go about that as professors.
We're actually trying, whether it will come off or not, we're trying at the moment to set up something that will model on what we've done, that will be not a money-making enterprise necessarily, but will be sort of eventually a distribution label that will allow, you know, scholars to identify key films that are in need of restoration, and there would be enough kind of money to do a restoration, to sort of preserve the films, digitize them, and then distribute them in that way. I think we were really fortunate in the sense that we had the money, the dedicated money within the grant, because it's not, you know, we didn't go for, this wasn't a Martin Scorsese World Cinema Fund, you know, foundation sort of restoration. It was still very expensive, you know, thousands of pounds, but the idea was to, you know, to allow these films to exist and to circulate and to audiences. I think the thing is that it's fine. I think we're quite, as academics, we actually have an access often and a relationship with the filmmakers, with who are the rights holders and the custodians of their films, that actually is quite unique in relation to sort of having an ability to speak directly to them and say, you know, we think this is really important, and is there any way, if we can find the money, we can, you know, we can work with you to preserve or restore or digitize this film. But I think it's not, if you're going to write a grant, add in something like this would be my advice, because it was certainly something that the people, the Research Council that funded us, were very keen on, and it's something that with subsequent money we've been able to secure was sort of, they were keen on, because it does respond to, I suppose, Alan's question about who is this for, who is it reaching, and there's a much more tangible and I think wider impact on a range of audiences, and with something like a film restoration potentially. So I don't know if that's that helpful as advice, but I think there's,
I mean, that would be absolutely genius, amazing, if you're able to set up something like that can give us guidelines. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Are there more questions? I see Alan had a great question. To what extent does bringing an Amazigh perspective force us to reread familiar films like The Battle of Algiers? Does it reveal something new about the films, or reveal something conservative, nationalist in a reactionary sense, in text usually read as progressive? If either of you would care to answer that about rereading text like The Battle of Algiers.
Yeah, I think The Battle of Algiers was a collaboration between a progressive filmmaker and a very reactionary regime, but it was actually like hyping itself internationally as a progressive kind of liberation movement. You know, it's part of what was happening also like in Algeria in 1960s and so on. So the FLN, which had fought a really bloody war against the French, we're actually using cinema. So, and actually, you know, the Cinema Mujahid, okay, was very, very important. It was a state-funded, but also really state-allied, I mean, cinema that emerged in Algeria in 1960s. It was very powerful and influential. But, you know, the Abat of Algiers was an Italian-Algerian, I mean, kind of co-production. And we look at film, it's, yeah, the film itself is fine. Yeah, I think like when you have dialogue I mean, between among Algerians and so on, it's always just in Darija. But we know that historically speaking, a lot of people, sorry, in Algerian Arabic, out of it, people who got, I mean, who were involved like in the war in Algeria, but especially in the Kasbah and so on, they were also Kabyles, okay? They were Berber speakers and so on. So if facing that, I mean, from the film, I don't know how conscious a decision that was, you know, from the filmmaker or his Algerian partners, but also just film being read, you know, as a kind of celebration of Arab nationalism, you know, was one of the things that happened afterwards, but was not, you know, kind of, I mean, controlled by the filmmaker. So I think just bringing this awareness about, you know, the diverse, you know, cultural identities of North Africa, but also the way that the regime that collaborated on this project, I mean, the Algerian regime, was, I mean, yes, it was, I mean, helping like produce this progressive film, but at the same time was doing things that were not so progressive, like silencing, I mean, the Amazigh or the Berbers, you know, trying to efface and even destroy their culture and voices and so on, and create their contribution to national history. I think being aware of such like voices when you are writing about films is really very important.
Thank you very much, Jamal, for that response. Yes.
Quick question for Jamal. You certainly have me interested in this whole area of films that I didn't know about, but I had a little trouble online finding any with English subtitles. Can you give us and our students some help with this?
If you are looking like for Amazigh films, but even Moroccan films with English subtitles, yes. I think we need a grant for that. Just a grant just about subtitling films, because it's just a long tradition in this part of the world that films are made, but then subtitled in French. But with the rise of this kind of transnational Moroccan cinema, we now have some films with English subtitles. So it's more and more common. But particularly for Amazigh cinema, unless you have really like films like Adios Carmen. So Adios Carmen, the film that I talked about in my last slide, has English subtitles. A House in Fields has English subtitles. There are some, but just about a dozen, okay? But you know, a lot of the key productions from 1990s, especially the video films, the foundational films and so on, unfortunately, they don't have English subtitles. So that's one thing maybe we need to think about in connection with the restoration. Not just restoring old films, trying to restore as many as possible, but also trying to restore them with English subtitles. So the film that, you know, this project restored, like Door to the Sky by W. Yazid, now has excellent, also, I mean, has excellent English subtitles. Okay, so that's, I mean, very important. But for Amazigh cinema, there aren't that many films, other than the recent films that have English subtitles. The old films now, they just have French subtitles, if they have subtitles at all.
I appreciate the point about funding, and I think Will's archival project has helped with that. But right now, for those films that do have subtitles, how do we get access to them?
Just a quick, we are so lucky. Also, we have Lucy McNair with us, who is one of the co-organizers of the Amazigh Film Festival here in New York City. And I believe, I'm not able to read the chat very well, that she has a link there.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
A way to access some Amazigh films with the English subtitles. And before we say bye or anything like that, I want to also make sure to call out to Lucy McNair and also my friend Nabil Boudra, who is Algerian Amazigh professor. So I want to see if either of you had any questions or expertise that you would want to share with us. Silence.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Hi, everybody. I was waiting for Lucy to go first.
Oh, Nabil, you are always so gracious. You go ahead.
No, I don't have anything in particular to add. I just want to thank you all for this good, nice, interesting event. And Jamal in particular for some of his comments about the Tamazight and so forth. So nothing in particular for the time being.
Lucy?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Nicole, so much for organizing this. And it's just wonderful to hear Jamal and Will talk about this fantastic, fantastic book and to see people that I have. Nabil, I haven't seen you in a while. I have a cold. I have one of the horrible flus going around in New York, so I won't talk long. But I do want to say there are many films, just to respond to William's comment, that there are many films we found in order to show them in New York that do have English subtitles and very good English subtitles. And so you might want to look at our website to get titles. And I just really appreciate, Jamal, your overview. It's just wonderful to have that. It really lays out so much that we can talk about and just see the tremendous change that has occurred since the 90s, huge changes, and how it is all woven together with changes in the society and outside and beyond Moroccan society. And so I guess my question is kind of coming back to this idea, Will, you were talking about YouTube, just access to video, and looking back now at that kind of emergence of Amazigh video, either Will or Jamal, what do you think the real impact of that was? And you know, I'm just curious because there's a very important article that was written by Sandra Carter that kind of really has inspired a lot of people about that emergence. I'm just curious from our perspective now, what you think about its impact.
Okay. Lucy, could you just repeat again? I'm sorry, maybe my connection isn't always great. Repeat your question.
I'm curious.
Are you asking about YouTube or something else?
Well, I'm asking about access to audiovisual. And this, I'm thinking of Sandra Carter's article on the emergence of Amazigh video, which came out in 2001 and was really important in terms of inspiring people to look at Amazigh film. And yeah. I'm wondering, now you've written the book and you've really explored this idea of transnational cinema, and we're coming back to look at the impact of Amazigh cinema, film, video on this. And I'm just curious if you could say a little bit more about the impact of this emergence of Amazigh video, which kind of like, you know, found its path in a way towards a public, towards a business model that became very popular. And just, I'm just wondering about how you see that impact. And do you feel like Amazigh film is going to be able to make that kind of passage into a vibrant, you know, kind of circulating cinema?
Yeah, well, I think the economic model of Amazigh cinema has changed. So in 1990s, it was mostly video cinema. So it was VHS-like tapes that were released, and then they circulated widely, not just in Morocco, but also to France, for example, and Belgium and Spain, to the Amazigh diaspora. But then, I mean, around the early 2000s, a lot of these films started to be released on VCD and then DVD, and that made them easy to pirate. And piracy really did, I mean, almost destroy the economic model of Amazigh cinema. So a lot of people who had been working in that cinema, you know, as actors and as directors and so on, they suffered a lot. And a lot of actually production companies, like in Southwest, like in Agadir, they just came, I mean, they had to close shop, unfortunately. And of course, that led to a decline in number of films that were made. I mean, around the mid 2000s. And actually a lot of, but at the same time, there was the emergence of like 35mm films in the Amazigh language. And those, you know, they were difficult to pirate, but also they weren't released on these things that made it easy for them to be pirated in the first place, like DVDs and VCDs and so on. Well, then the creation of this Amazigh TV channel has contributed to the rise of film productions. But also there are these independent production companies out there. But the idea is that piracy has had a harmful impact on the cinema. Well, there is informal distribution. Okay, piracy is just part of it. But a lot of films from like 1990s and so on, they are now available. Many of them are available online for free for people to watch on YouTube and so on. And as Will was saying earlier, just sheer number of people like following and watching those movies is actually creating like connections between different generations of Amazigh cinema, because people who worked in field in 1990s, they are not making film. Most of them are not making films anymore. That's like veteran generation. Now there is the rise of a new generation of young Amazigh filmmakers. Some are Amazigh, like even by language and bringing. Some are just working, on making films with Amazigh people or just using the Amazigh language and so on. And Will mentioned Nadir Bourmouche, this very important, activist filmmaker in Morocco. Now in Morocco, we also have, a number of film schools, and some of the graduates who are making films are making them, in the Amazigh language. So this recent Amazigh film, for example, Charter, okay, that is winning prizes, at the moment, like, internationally. There are lots of many other films that are just getting, making Amazigh cinema just more visible. But yet, I think the economic model, changed from video cinema in the 1990s to state-dependent cinema around the early 2000s, but also with just, the recognition of language. Now, the filmmakers are able to get some state support, but mostly through, the TV channel rather than through the classical network of production in Morocco, which is the Moroccan Cinema Center. At the Moroccan Cinema Center, it is very rare to see any Amazigh language film selected, okay, every year to be supported by this center. So I think there is a lot of work that still needs to be done, on that front.
I think I'd just add there as well that this kind of model, which is essentially a sort of entrepreneurial model that works outside of the official system and necessarily has to find its audience, right? It has to find its audience to survive because it doesn't have those kind of mechanisms of any state funding even available, is one that's been, began essentially in Nigeria with what we call Nollywood, and then has kind of been replicated. And this is another kind of, it's its own distinct kind of approach to that, but is a variation. And I think one of the important things there is that by establishing that kind of audience and reaching often that diasporic network of people who want to consume these films, but also kind of locally, it gives a visibility and a presence that allows for a continuation of those films, and also a possibility for diversity to begin to emerge, which Jamal is alluding to, sort of like the films that come later within the context of that cinema. So it's kind of the key thing is that there is a democratization, I think, of the technology that allows a marginalized community to have a voice through these films, regardless of what we think of the kind of like a focus on popular narratives or whatever it might be. It allows that to kind of exist, and then it then has to negotiate, as Jamal's referred to there, a kind of quite different system and a different kind of set of politics of production when you're going towards what the CCM is looking for. But I think that it's that kind of, the significance is also there, and is not just in Moroccan cinema, but is one that's kind of repeated, actually, not, but mainly across Africa, which is interesting. And just final shout out to, and Alan did put it in there, but also I put in the website for Lindy Vadovi's Screen Worlds project, which is absolutely worth engaging with.
Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot today, and it was wonderful to have you with us, Jamal and Will. And again, it's too bad that Florence couldn't make it, but she was represented by you. So, and such an important book. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nicole, for putting this all together so wonderfully with your energy and your connections and your hard work.
Thank you, William. You're a wonderful co-host.
Nicole, can I just add a quick recommendation?
Yes,
very quick.
please.
This discussion reminded me of a film by Nabil Ayouch Razia. I'm sure most of you have seen the film. And there is one story in that film that talks about Tamazight as a marginalized language in Morocco, and speaking of minorities as well. So I think it's a good film to add to this corpus of films.
Thank you. Yes.